No. I betrayed them.
Avengers Doomsday is approaching, and the first round of filming has officially wrapped. The first half of the epic conclusion to the Multiverse Saga will finally hit theaters on December 18, 2026, marking one of the biggest movies in Marvel Cinematic Universe history. Fan-favorite MCU heroes, including the new Avengers and the Fantastic Four, have been confirmed to appear in the upcoming Avengers sequel. But the real shocker is that the film will also bring back Fox's long-awaited X-Men. Charles Xavier, Magneto, Mystique, Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Beast, and more are expected to return in the next Avengers movie, making Doomsday the biggest multiverse crossover since Deadpool and Wolverine. Longtime Marvel fans may want to revisit Fox's X-Men saga before Doomsday, and with good reason. But luckily, catching up doesn't have to mean rewatching the entire franchise. There's really just one X-Men film everyone needs to revisit before the team's comeback. Marvel fans who want to refresh themselves on the mutants' adventures before Avengers Doomsday don't need to sit through the entire decade-spanning saga. Fox's original X-Men movie is the only one that truly matters for the Multiverse Saga. Released in 2000, the film stylishly introduced the franchise, bringing together an iconic team of mutants led by Professor Charles Xavier as they fought against both human oppression and Magneto's extremist Brotherhood of Mutants. X-Men introduces nearly all of the characters confirmed to return in the MCU, including Professor X, Magneto, Mystique, and Cyclops. Only Nightcrawler and Beast were added later in the sequels. While the X-Men series eventually expanded into prequels, spin-offs, and sequels, none of that is essential to revisit before Avengers Doomsday. In fact, the 2000 film remains the only entry that still aligns closely with the version of the team Marvel Studios is bringing into the MCU. Everything shifted in X-Men Days of Future Past when Wolverine traveled back in time to stop the creation of the Sentinels and prevent his dystopian future. Upon returning, he discovered he hadn't just changed the future but rewrote the entire timeline. Many of the tragedies shown in earlier films never happened, and several dead heroes were revealed to be alive again. Based on the ending of Days of Future Past, Wolverine's actions essentially erased much of the X-Men canon. Jean Grey and Cyclops, for example, were alive in this timeline, meaning the events of The Last Stand and everything that followed were effectively undone. Even X2, X-Men United, can be considered non-canon, since Jean's death in that film directly triggered The Last Stand. Prequels like First Class technically fit, but Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix openly contradict the ending of Days of Future Past. Spin-offs like Deadpool and Logan appear to survive as canon, but they're unlikely to matter much for the version of the team that Avengers Doomsday will feature. If Doomsday is truly reconnecting audiences with the Days of Future Past timeline, then everything outside the original 2000 film becomes unnecessary in this revised chronology. Marvel Studios focusing only on the first X-Men film actually makes sense. Doomsday will serve as a heartfelt farewell to the characters who launched the modern era of superhero cinema. This farewell is also deeply personal for Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige, who got his start as an associate producer on the original X-Men. That job launched the career that would eventually put him at the helm of the entire MCU. Revisiting the events of this classic film gives Feige the perfect full circle moment as Marvel closes out the X-Men chapter and prepares to relaunch the team for the next saga. Ignoring most of the X-Men timeline is ultimately the right call for Avengers Doomsday. This choice effectively erases the less popular entries The Last Stand, Apocalypse, and Dark Phoenix from relevance. The only real losses are X2 and First Class, which, while beloved, don't cleanly fit the MCU's revised canon. This move dramatically simplifies the notoriously messy X-Men timeline, giving Doomsday room to use the characters without being tied down by contradictions. No matter how anyone tries to justify it, the X-Men films created a timeline so tangled it can't realistically be reconciled. For Doomsday's purposes, it's far easier to wipe the slate clean. It also gives Marvel creative freedom to reimagine underused X-Men like James Marsden's Cyclops. With a fresh history and unwritten future, every returning mutant, especially those fans felt were mishandled in the originals, can get a second chance. Cyclops, in particular, was sidelined for years, overshadowed by Wolverine and Jean Grey, and portrayed as little more than a jealous, rigid boyfriend far from his comic book counterpart. Avengers Doomsday offers a chance to redeem Cyclops, and most fans would agree it's long overdue. Even though much of the X-Men saga won't matter for Doomsday, audiences could still see more characters from Earth 10005 appear in the crossover. Alongside the confirmed 6, many speculate Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool will show up, especially after the massive success of Deadpool and Wolverine. Actor Evan Peters has even expressed interest in reprising Quicksilver in the MCU, hopeful the franchise could finally do justice to the speedster's abilities. Peters already has a working history with Marvel Studios, having appeared in WandaVision and Agatha all along. Given that relationship, his return in Doomsday or Secret Wars feels very likely. Considering the confirmed cast, it's also reasonable to expect Halle Berry and Famke Janssen back as Storm and Jean Grey. Both were core members of the original X-Men and would logically be part of the upcoming Avengers lineup. Fans should also keep an eye out for Shawn Ashmore's Iceman and Anna Paquin's Rogue making appearances. Realistically, this will probably be the last time audiences see this particular incarnation of the mutants before Marvel fully reboots them in the MCU. That's why fans will want to savor as many returning favorites as possible when Doomsday finally arrives. Avengers Doomsday hits theaters December 18, 2026.